Hello everyone. So today we'll be starting with chapter 2, which is what is democracy and why democracy? Why not just choose a monarch or a dictatorship or a military rule? Let's study about that. The stories and analysis in the previous chapter gave us a sense of what democracy is like, what it means to have democracy. There we describe some are governments and governments as democratic and some as non-democratic. We saw how governments in some of those countries change from one form to the other. Let us now draw some general lessons from these stories and ask more basic question: what is democracy? What is democracy? What are its features? This chapter builds on a simple question, definition of democracy. Step by step we work on finding out the meaning that evolved in, meaning of the terms, which have evolved in this definition. The aim here is to understand clearly that bare minimum features of a democratic form of a form of government. After going through this chapter, we should be able to distinguish between a democratic form of government from a non-democratic government. Towards the end of this chapter, we step beyond this minimal objectives and introduce a broader idea. What is the idea, what is the logic when we talk about democracy, what we want as a goal. In the previous chapter, we've seen that democracy is the most prevalent form of government in the world today, and it is expanding for two more countries. But why is it so? What makes it better than other forms of government? This is the uh, big question that we might take up in this question. So, what is democracy? Let's come here. Uh, in chapter 1, we read many stories, from different parts of the world, and through these stories we discuss the various governments, and organizations. We call some of these democracies, others can be described as non-democracies. Can you recall each of these democracies, something about the governments um before the governments that were described as democracies? Chile before and after Pinochet's rule, Poland and after the fall of communist Ghana in the early period of Nkrumah government. So Chile was that, it was first a democratic country, then it under Mr. Pinochet it became a dictatorial, then it was a communist in Poland. But after you know this thing after the change in, support, especially, after the fall of Soviet Union in 1990 or 91. So there was this thing, loss of support, and people said that we don't want this type of government or rule where only one party, communist party, can be will make the government, and only they cannot even decide the leader. So that was, and whereas Ghana, it was a colonist, it was a colony of Britain. But Nkrumah, who there was this period of strike, by the workers and everything. So Nkrumah ended up being the, a protester who ended up being the president. But he also started that, okay, I'm going to be he started dictatorship and everything. So that is why is they said that we don't want this also, we want democracy. So even he was removed. So that's how. So Nkrumah he himself was a teacher, and that's how the Ghana country, country in Africa, gained its independence, and it was called Gold Coast before it was actually called Ghana. So then we've seen that he was a goldsmith also, and that was a struggle. Whereas in Poland, of course, there was a strike and everything. Why do you think is common to them? Why do we club them together in the label of democracy? What is that distinguishes these governments from Pinochet's rule in Chile, communist rule in? So we've already discussed why, these all are different. Why do these governments have in common with the military rule in Myanmar? So of course, this thing is there only that there was the mm, no choosing of the leaders by the people? Why do we say that these governments are not democratic? Because people don't have any say. They don't have the say in saying who's going to control, not control, is who's going to govern the country. On the basis of this analysis, write down some common features of democratic non-government. So we've already discussed it a lot of times. So uh, why define the democracy? Before we proceed further, let us first take a note on an note of an objection by Mary. She does not like this way of defining democracy and wants to ask some basic questions. So we'll see that. Palestinians' democratic choice must be respected. So Palestine is a big debate, that's still even in present time. The excuses given for refusing to deal with Hamas will not wash. This is a chance for Europe to have an independent rule. First Afghanistan parliament in 3 decades to open amid tight security. So this book, whenever it was written, okay, there was that was the first time, during it was an article. There's no date written here on the article, but yeah, the first parliament was going to open in Afghanistan, after 3 decades, you know and bit in tight security. And today, look, again, they've actually, been back to square one where they were. Taliban is ruling them and going to form a government also. So Nepal king invents democracy, promotes it. Why wait for revolution? Ask Bhutan's king. So these are news articles from, this is so from 2003 it's written. So that's how it is, about news items like this appear very often in the newspaper. Do they all use the word democracy in the same sense? No, every democracy is not used in the same sense, where one is talking about revolution, the other is saying that, of course, one is saying democracy and where is saying parliament. So these are the features of democracy, or the minimum closest they can reach to. Her teacher Matilda Lingdo responds to her questions as others are classmates join the discussion. So there's a discussion going on in a class. Mary, ma'am, I don't like this idea. First, we spend one chapter discussing democracies in different parts of the world, and then we want to find out the meaning of democracy. I mean, logically, shouldn't have we approached the other way around? Shouldn't the meaning have come first and then the example? So, what does the ma'am says? I can see your point, but this is not how we reason in everyday life. We use words like pen, rain, or love. Do we wait to have a definition of these words before we use them? Come to think of it, do we have a clear definition of these words? It is only by using a word that we understand its meaning. So here, this actually, this is a very beautiful thing that's written. We don't first define that, we only know the real meaning or importance of it after using it. But then why do we need definitions and all? So she's questioning that if that's the case, that we are using it and then we are understanding its meaning, that why in the end have a definition? We need a definition only when we come across difficulty in the use of a word. So if something is very difficult, then only we need a clear definition, so that there is no confusion. We need a definition of rain only when we wish to distinguish it from, say, drizzle or cloudburst. So drizzle is, when it just rains like this, tap tap, or like very very this thing लिटिल, मतलब बहुत झिमझिम वाली ऐसी बारिश नहीं हो रही, बट थोड़ी थोड़ी सी बारिश हो रही है. क्लाउड बस्ट इज व्हेन in a small area, lot of rain is there. So that's when we say cloud burst. The same is true for democracy. We need a clear definition only because people use it for different purposes, because very different kinds of governments call them. Because if everybody is this thing, there's a dictatorship in one country and still they claim that we are a democratic country. So we need to have a clear definitions. They are not letting those people even form a government or elect their leaders, and they claim that no, we are the democratic country, whereas in one country like India, we have the right to vote for the leaders we want and elect after every 5 years. and we say that we are democratic. So who's right? Either we are right or they are right. That cannot be that one. In one case, people are having a right to choose their leaders, whereas the others, they are not even getting to criticize it. So that cannot be there now. So Ribyang, but why do we need to work on a definition? The other way you quoted Abraham Lincoln to us was, democracy is a rule of the people, for the people, and by the people. We in Meghalaya always ruled ourselves. This is accepted by everyone. Why do we need to change that? So what does the teacher say? I'm not saying we need to change it. I too find this definition very beautiful, but we don't know if this is the best way of defining you, unless we think of about it about for ourselves. We must not accept something just because it is famous, just because everyone accepts it. So if even if in a majority, that's how the minority is suppressed, minority group. If everybody says we'll have only, no, we don't need education system and falana, we are intelligent, and we are good with only two classes per week. But what of the students who are weak in studies? Of course, everybody in the class are not same intellectual level, or they are weak, they take time to learn. So that shouldn't mean that they don't have, or their voices shouldn't be heard. So that cannot be done, that it is only we'll accept this definition because just because it is suiting you. Okay, so that cannot be done. Ma'am, can I suggest something? We don't need to look for any definition. I read somewhere that the word democracy comes from a Greek word, uh, demokratia. In Greek, demo means people and kratia means rule. So democracy is ruled by the people. This is a correct meaning. Where is the need to debate? So madam says that this is a very helpful way of thinking about this matter. I would just say that this does not always work, like this. A word does not remain tied to its origins. It's not necessary that, for example, there are a lot of words that we use, they have more than one meaning. So that's not how it works. And over time, the meaning of words, they keep on changing. Just think of computers. Originally they were used for computing, that is to say calculating very difficult mathematics sums. They were very powerful characters. Nowadays, very few people use computers for computing sums. They use it for writing, for designing, for listening to music, and for watching films. Words remain the same, but their meanings can change with time, so a lot of times their meanings change. For example, in your daily life also, you can see that one word might mean has two three meanings. In that case, it is not very helpful to look at the originals of the so another student says, ma'am, so basically you are saying that is if that there is no shortcut to our thinking about the matters ourselves. We have to think about its meaning and evolve a definition. So you're saying you got me right. Let us get on it. So here's an activity, Let us look at that. Let us take Mad Leong Do ma'am seriously and try to write down the exact definition of some of the simple words that we use all the time. For example, like rain, love, pen. For example, is there a way of defining a pen that distinguishes clearly from a pencil, a brush, or a chalk, or a crayon? Can you define or clearly differentiate between all these? Of course, when you're seeing it, you can easily differentiate. But without seeing or without touching, or can you give me a definition, of that? What is the meaning of the particular the things we use to write? What you've learned from this attempt, what does it teach about us and about us as an understanding of meaning of democracy? So we all might use or give it a different meaning, to what is defined as a pen. I might say that pen is a long, maybe, which has a refiller inside, or it has a grip with which we write, and you can see the color, that is there. So I might have different meaning. Somebody might say that it is a thin cylindrical. So might, it's not necessary that all the pen are thin. Some might be, thick in nature. For example, there are ink pens which are thicker as compared to ball pens or gel pens, so that can be. So a simple definition, I've heard about a different version: democracy is of the people, for far from the people, and where they by the people. Don't we, and why don't we accept that? So here this girl is saying, kid is saying that I have heard of different version of democracy, meaning a simple definition. Let us get back to our discussion on similarities and differences among governments that are called democracies. In the last chapter, we identified one simple factor for all the democracies: the government is chosen by the people. So one thing that is for sure is that the government is chosen by the people. We could thus start with a simple definition: a democracy is a form of government in which the rulers are elected by the people. So this is the short done, that this is the part of the democracy, that people, the rulers, or whoever is going to, it's not even correct to say rulers, or I'll say whoever is going to govern the country, are elected by the people. This is a useful starting point. This definition allows us to separate democracy from other forms of government. So this is a important starting point, that at least we know that they are elected by the people. And that's how we can clearly differentiate from non-democratic. The army rulers of Myanmar are not elected by the people. Those happen to be in control of the army become the rulers of the country. uh, People have no say in this decision. People have dictators like Pinochet are not elected by the people. There, this also applies to monarchies. The kings of Nepal and Saudi Arabia rule not because people have chosen them, but because they happen to be born, in that particular royal family. This simple definition is not adequate. It reminds us that democracy is people's rule. But if you think of this definition in an unthinking manner, we would end up end up calling almost every country that holds an election holds an election a democracy. That would be misleading. If we shall find out in chapter 4, every government in the contemporary world wants to be called democracy, even if it is not so. This is why we need to clearly distinguish between a government that is democracy and what that pretends to be one. We can do so by understanding each word in the definition clearly and spelling out the features of what it means to be a democratic country. Ribyang went back home and collected some famous quotations on democracies. This time, she did not mention the names of the people who said or wrote these. She wants you to read these and comment on how good or useful are these thoughts. Democracy gives every man the right to be or to be his own oppressor. Democracy consists of choosing your dictators after they've told you what you think is what you hear. Man's capacity for justice makes democracy possible, but man's inclination to injustice makes democracy necessary. Democracy is a device that ensures we shall be governed no better than we deserve. All the ills of democracy can be cured by more democracy. So here you can see a signboard of democracy, and here you can see gun. I think these are men in with weapons and maybe military. So the cartoon was drawn when elections were held in Iraq, with the presence of US and other foreign powers. What do you think this cartoon is saying? Why is democracy written in this the way it is written? So do you think that forcing democracy on a nation, by uh, forcefully keeping elections, or even ending up keeping the people you want them to be in the rule, want them to govern, is it really the definition of democracy? Do you think that? So now we talk about the features of democracy, what it means, and what are the features of democracy. We have started with a simple definition that democracy is a form of government in which people are elected by the people. So this is to confirm that people are elected by the people. This raises many questions. Who are the rulers in this definition? Which officials must be elected for any government to be called a democracy, which decisions may be taken by non-elected officials in a democracy, what kind of election constitutes a democratic election, what condition must be fulfilled for an election to be considered democratic, who are the people who can elect the rulers or get elected as rulers, should this include every citizen on an equal basis, can a democracy deny some citizens this right, finally what kind of form of government is democracy, can elected rulers do whatever they want in a democracy, or must democratic country function with some limits, should there be some limits, is it necessary for a democratic country to respect some rights of the citizens, let us consider each. So what is actually, we've asked all these questions, and let's see. So this is an example of Syria, no entry before you fill the form and become a member if a member in Al-Bahat party, is that clear? So she's saying that you can only enter Syria if you become a member of the party, this thing. So that was she, telling to democracy. Matlab agreeing, matlab you will have to, what it means that you'll have to whatever the party, this Al Bahat party says. Syria is a small Asian country, I'll show you on the map. And the ruling Bahat party and some of its small allies are the only parties that are allowed in the country. Do you think this cartoon could apply to China or Mexico? What does the crown of leaves of democracy signify? So we are going to study about that also. And so here you can see what the cartoon tries to question, that does it mean that a country can only have will be a democratic when the members are from a only specific party, for example in Syria from Al Bahad? So that's not how it should be. So major decisions by elected leaders in Pakistan, when we talk about Pakistan, it's a neighboring country. General Pervez Musharraf led a military coup in October 1999. So that is why in the 2000 map of democracy expansion we did not see Pakistan, whereas in the this thing 1975 expansion of democracy with Pakistan was a democratic country. He overthrew a democratically elected government and declared himself the chief executive of the country. Later, he changed his designation to president. First, he said that I am the chief executive. Then he said, no, I am the president, and held the referendum in the country that granted him a 5-year extension. Pakistani media, human rights organizations, and democracy activists said that the referendum was based on a malpractices. They said that it wasn't a fair way of conducting election. And in August 2002, he issued a legal framework order that amended the constitution of Pakistan. According to this order, the president can dismiss the national and provisional assembly. So now they can even dismiss the national government of provisional assemblies, like small states which are there in the country. For example, our Kerala, our this thing Uttarakhand, our Delhi, and so on. The work of the civilian cabinet is supervised by the National Security Council, which is dominated by military officers. There is a presence of military officers. After passing this law, elections were held to the national and state assemblies. So Pakistan has had elections. They have had elections, and elected representatives have representatives. They have some powers, but the final power rests with the military officers and General Musharraf himself. But when we talk about that, who's going to be the deciding factor? Is it going to be on a just and fair means? No, it is the final power rests with the military officers and the General Musharraf himself. So how can they be a democratic country? Clearly, there are many reasons why Pakistan under General Musharraf should not be called a democracy. But let us focus on one of these. Can we say that the rulers are elected by the people in Pakistan? Not quite. People may have elected the representative to the national and provisional assemblies, but those elected representatives are not really the rulers. They are not the rulers, because the final decisions, they are not going to have a final say. They cannot take the final decisions. The power to take decisions rests with the army officers, and General Musharraf. So, and none of them by the directly elected people. So this is very important. This happens in many dictatorships and monarchies. They formally have an elected parliament and government, but the real power is not with those who are is with those who are not elected. In the last chapter we read about the role of USSR in communist Poland and that of US in contemporary Iraq. So we'll study the external forces, whether it's the USSR or United States. Here the real power was with some external force powers and not with locally elected representatives. This cannot be called people rules. How can it be called people rules if some other country who is thousands of kilometers away from you is making decisions on your part? How can that be called people's rule? So this gives us the first feature, that in a democracy the final decision making power must rest with those elected by people. So this is very important, that in a democracy the final decision making power must rest with those people who are elected by the uh, people, who are chosen by the people. So major decisions are by first, so if we talk about the features, then major decisions are by elected leaders. So you can see democracy, here is a gun. The cartoon is drawn in the context of Latin America. Do you think it applies to Pakistan situation as well? Think of other countries where this could apply. Does this mean sometimes, does this even happen in your countries as well? Matlab, they are saying that it is by force, vote, democracy, and that person is showing a gun. Matlab, whatever, see, if somebody shows a gun, we are forced to do what the other party wants. How can you do it freely without without under anyone's pressure? Of course you are in the pressure of the person who's showing you gun. If you don't do it according, they're gonna kill, they might even shoot you. So all this is so remote for me. Is democracy all about rulers and governments? Can we talk about a democratic class or a democratic family? So then he's saying this is all very new for me. What about democratic classroom? What is that? And or a democratic family? So the second important feature is fair and free electoral competition in China. If we talk about China, which is also a neighbor, then elections are regularly held after every 5 years for electing the country's parliament, called Guangua Renmen Daibyo Dahua, matlab National People's Congress. This is in their language, in Mandarin, but in English it's National People's Congress. The National People's Congress has the power to appoint the president of the country. It has nearly 3,000 members elected from all over China. Some members are elected by the army. Some are even elected by army. Before contesting elections, a candidate needs the approval of the Chinese Communist Party. So before even they are standing up for the election, they need the approval of the Chinese Communist Party. Only those members of the Chinese Communist Party or 8 smaller parties allied to it were allowed. So they are saying that only those people who are either member of the Communist Party of China or the smaller parties which are allied to it, only they can stand up in the election. The government is always formed by the Communist Party. Since its independence in 1930, China got independence in 1930. Sorry, that is wrong. China, this is not about China, because China got it in 1950, I think. They also got it we got it in 1947. They also, I think, got it in 1950, around that. Sorry, this is wrong. Since it's a different thing. Since its independence in 1930, we are talking about Mexico and not China. This portion is about China, but here we're talking about 1930. The country which got independence is Mexico. Holds election after every 6 years to elect its president. The country has never been under the military or dictator's rule. So Mexico, after getting its independence, it has elections after every 6 years to elect its president, and it's never, till now, it has never been under the control of a military or dictator rule. So that's nice. But until 2000, every election was won by a party called PRI, Institutional Revolutionary Party. So is it possible that if if every 6 years elections are being held since 1930, but only people from the same party are being chosen. It's very rare, that people from only from the same party are chosen or they won the election. That's very rare. So why is it so? And the party which was there, it's institutional revolutionary party. So let's dive into it. Opposition parties did contest elections but never managed to win. So they're saying there were opposition parties but they were never managed to win. How can they not even once over the 6 years, after every 6 years they cannot win? Matlab, that's impossible. The government of this party cannot be ruling so perfectly. The PRF was known to use many dirty tricks. So now we know that they were, this is the truth, that they were using many illegal or dirty ways, to win elections. All those who were employed in government offices had to attend its party meetings. So how can government offices, attend the party meetings of this government? The teachers of government schools used to force parents to vote to this particular party. So you can see teachers were being forced, that they tell the parents that government offices they had to attend the meeting. Media largely ignored the activities of the opposition political parties except to criticize them. um, Sometimes the polling booths, were shifted from one place to another in the last minute, which made it very difficult for the people to cast their votes. The PI spent a large sum of money in the campaign for its candidates. Should we consider that elections described as above as examples of people electing their rulers? Reading these examples, we get we get a sense that we cannot. There are many problems here. In China, elections do not offer the people any serious choice. They have to choose a ruling party and the candidates approve it. So how is it fair that you choose only members from a particular party and you're not given the choice? So how can that be there? Can we call this as a choice? You're not giving a choice, you're not even giving them option. You are saying only these people are there, you have to choose from there. So how can that be called democratic? In the Mexican example, wherever we talk about the Mexican example, people seemed to really have a choice, but in practice they had no choice. Even if they were standing, they were not winning because the government was playing dirty tricks to win. But in practice they had no choice. There was also a way the ruling party could be defeated even if people were against it. There are not fair elections. So here we know that they are not fair election. We can thus add a second feature to our understanding, that holding elections of any kind is not sufficient. Only that you are saying that there are elections taking place, that is only not sufficient. The elections must offer a real choice between political alternatives. You should have the other options to parties to vote, and it should be possible for people to use this choice to remove existing rulers if they wish to. So our democracy must be based on a free and fair election, where those currently in power have a fair chance of losing. It shouldn't be that only one party is winning. They should also have a fair chance of losing. They should even have a fair chance of winning, but they should also be equally have a chance of losing the elections. We shall find more about this, about democratic elections, in chapter 4. So we've seen the two features now. Okay,